Well, welcome to Straight Talk with NDFB. I'm here with Alisha, the first of our Harvesting Across North Dakota with NDFB series. And today we are talking with Kristie Sundeen. Kristie, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your operation and what you are harvesting today.
So my name is Kristie Sundeen. I farm with my husband, Austin. We have two kids. We farm in northeast of Devil's Lake by Brocket. Maybe some people know where that is and some people don't. But our operation consists of my husband, my father-in-law, and then we have one full-time hired man that helps us. And we haven't actually started harvest yet. We were supposed to start actually today, and actually yesterday on some canola, but we got rain last night. So unfortunately, we were not able to get started yet. But we did desiccate our canola. So our plan was to straight cut our canola this weekend.
So I live in the Spiritwood area and we used to do canola down here. And back then we just had to put it in big swaths, like cut it down, put it in swaths. And I don't think we ever desiccated. I don't know if that was popular at the time because we stopped probably 20 years ago plus. When did you guys start doing that as like a normal practice of harvest?
So we used to swath canola. Actually, my dad and my brother farm up by Langdon. They still swath canola up there. It's kind of a grower by grower decision. Some growers actually do both, depending on how they want to spread out their harvest. If you swath, you can actually get on it a little bit quicker. If you straight cut, it's usually a little bit longer. Down in the southwest part of North Dakota and even west, not a lot of guys desiccate, but it's more of an arid climate, a little bit drier. But you get up into this northeast and we have such a short growing season. We're always humid and we're always wet and you're always waiting for stuff to dry down. So to be able to timely harvest canola, if you want to straight cut, you've got to desiccate it. We started desiccating about, well, I would say it's probably at least 6 years ago. So we've been straight cutting our canola for the last 6 years. We don't do a lot of canola on our farm. We used to do quite a bit more, but we've kind of pared it down and do a lot more corn and soybeans. But we usually do anywhere from 200 to 400 acres of canola a year.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Have you guys always raised canola on your farm, or what drew you guys to raising canola?
So as long as my husband and I have been together, we've been raising canola. I grew up on a farm that raised canola. I think we started raising canola back in the 90s. I would have still obviously been in like middle school, high school at the time, but that's about the time period that we started raising canola. That's when canola, became a hybrid. The acres really started spreading from that point on. Before that, it was open pollinated, but it's been a really good cash crop. High inputs, obviously, but from a commodity standpoint, it has been a really good cash crop for most guys.
Where do you market your canola? You just bring it to the local elevator and they put it on the train for you, or?
Depends on the year, but actually we tend to haul straight to a plant. We've hauled it down to Enderlin, we've hauled to Hallock before too, so we tend to haul it straight to the end user, the crush plants. But you can haul it locally, obviously, but there's a little bit better market, especially if you're set up to do some long distance hauling. You get a better cash price if you can haul it direct.
Okay.
And I know nothing about raising canola. My family has never raised canola. And honestly, my neighbor, that's kind of the first time I've really seen canola around my area. I live near Emmery. I live near the Valley City area. And that's kind of the first time I've seen canola was this year around our area. Otherwise, I've never seen canola really grow, bloom, and being harvested. They'll probably do it here in the next couple weeks or so. But what are the main challenges of growing canola and harvesting canola?
So canola is a specialty crop. Even though there's about 2 million acres in the US, it still is kind of a specialty crop in that aspect. It's an oil seed. Acres are kind of spreading throughout North Dakota, and part of the reason is obviously with being able to straight cut now, it's easy to get into it. Before when you had to swath it, you couldn't straight cut canola, guys had to own a swather. Well, Nobody wants to go out and buy a swather. So, there wasn't as many acres. Now that guys don't have to do that and they can jump in and out of it, there's a lot more guys that do that. Spreading into other acres, part of it is because canola does better on the semi-marginal ground than like soybeans do. So if growers in some of those other areas like Valley City area, Jamestown down there, they have some ground that's probably not as good for soybeans, and those fields are bringing down their APH yields or something. There's guys that are more interested in growing canola just because they've been able to get a good yield off of it, 2,000 plus pounds off of it on semi-marginal ground, and the price has been good. So that's part of the reason why the acres have spread a little bit, is that it's kind of a good fit for guys in a rotation. You can put pretty much any crop onto canola except for probably dry beans and sunflowers. Obviously, you need a year rotation in between there, but it'll rotate with corn. It'll rotate with wheat. You can actually do a back-to-back with soybeans also. So it doesn't have any rotation restrictions in terms of like herbicides that you're putting on it. So guys have kind of jumped into it a little bit on that aspect. It's not always an easy crop to grow. I would say sometimes it's a little bit finicky. From the planting season, you want to have a really nice seed bed. Sometimes emergence can be a problem with canola, and you run into a lot of early season pests, so like flea beetles are a big one. If canola is just starting to come off the ground and we have flea beetles coming after them, there are seed treatments. We use, a dual seed treatment. So you're using a neonic plus you're using a secondary seed treatment that's going to help. But flea beetles are still a big issue when it comes to canola, and guys will have to do some post spraying. But if you can get canola past that first early stage, it's a pretty hardy plant. It's just that first, probably the 4 leaf stages. That's usually when you run into the biggest issues when you're trying to establish that stand.
You said it's a higher input crop. Is that just because of the amount of fertilizer or spray in general, or why is that?
No, it's the fertilizer. I mean, it's a high input crop from a fertilizer standpoint. You need nitrogen, you need phosphorus. You want to make sure that your potassium level is good. And then it's a high sulfur user too. And you want to use sulfate sulfur because it's a readily user. So usually you're putting like 25 pounds of sulfur down. So it's even a higher user of sulfur than like corn is. High nitrogen user too. So you're looking at 150 to 200 pounds of N that you're putting down. So from a cost standpoint, it's there. Seed is fairly expensive. You're looking at probably $60 to $75 an acre just for the seed.
Wow.
So, the beginning costs on canola are pretty expensive, especially when you compare it to like soybeans or something. Herbicide costs are not horrible on canola just because there's not a lot of options. Basically, you've got Roundup, you've got Liberty, you've got Clearfield, and then you can spray grass herbicides in season. That's about all you can spray, depending on the herbicide tolerance of the seed that you bought. But it's you're for sure probably going to end up spraying a fungicide on it. It's very susceptible to white mold. So most guys, if they grow canola continuously in their rotation, 8 out of 10 years, you're going to be spraying a fungicide. It's kind of an automatic thing that's going to happen within canola. And then obviously, if you're stray cutting and you're in the Northeast, you're desiccating. And desiccating costs are going to be anywhere from 10 to $16 an acre. And that's not including the cost of a plane if you decide to do it by air.
So, I mean, like you said, sounds like a pretty high input crop. What are you looking at per bushel then? Yield and then price wise?
So most guys don't talk in a per bushel when it comes to canola.
Okay. It's been a while, like I said.
Yeah. In Canada, they do, but in the US, most growers, it's a pounds per acre type thing. Most guys have a yield goal. You go in the traditional canola areas and their yield goal is probably 2,500 pounds. You go in some of the fringe areas, depending on what type of ground it is, you're talking 2,000 pounds. Anything below 2,000 pounds for most guys is a failure on canola. From a money standpoint, right now the commodity price of canola is in the tank. I don't know if anyone's watched the news, but Trudeau has kind of started a little bit of a trade war with China. And basically, the canola market is based out of Canada. So it's on the Winnipeg Board of Trade on ice there. So it's based up there on the pricing. And obviously, there's exchange rates that come into play as it comes into the US. But if they mess things up there, it affects the board price. And right now, canola is commodity price right now is in the tank, and I think most guys are a little upset about that, but there's really nothing we can do about it. It's not even a US based issue, it's a Canadian based issue. So we're just going to have to ride it out at this point. But 20 cents and higher is kind of where most guys want to be.
Do you put your orders in like beforehand? Do you pre-price, or do you just have to take it whenever you bring it in? Like take the price whenever you bring it in.
You can contract, depending. We don't typically do any contracting. We don't do enough acres for us to warrant it. And usually we don't like to contract until we know the crop is going to be close to making it, just because we're not sitting on bushels to buy it out or anything. So we did not do any contracting on canola. There are some guys that do, but the pricing wasn't really, it's been fairly flat the last year, so there hasn't been a lot of fluctuation in movement. So I don't know that there's been anything that has triggered guys to want to price the canola. There's a lot of stuff that actually sat in the bin last year because guys just didn't want to sell it at those prices. So
as far as the dynamics of harvesting on your operation, is it a family affair? Do you hire custom group? Do you do it all yourselves on the weekends, on the non-rainy days? Tell us a little bit about how you guys do harvest.
So we just have one combine. We used to have two, but we ran into where we were struggling to find enough people to operate all the equipment. We are about a 4,500 to 5,000 acre farm, but we have about 1,700 acres of corn. So you're only operating one combine in corn anyways. So we traded in two combines a couple years ago, and we went and upgraded to a bigger combine, bigger header, and just one combine. My father-in-law usually is the one that runs the combine. My son actually runs the grain cart when he's not in school. And then we've got one full-time hired man who he bounces into everything depending on what we need him. He'll run grain cart, he runs truck, and then my husband runs semi and truck. So he kind of corrals everybody on that. I will say for myself, I have a full-time job, so I have not been in the combine as much or the grain cart. That's usually where I am, is in the grain cart, but I have not been able to be in the grain cart as much as I used to. My job has kept me a little bit busier in the last couple of years.
Yeah, you have some miles to put on the road.
Yep. Yeah, I travel a lot for my job, so it makes life interesting. The plus part about that, I will say, is that my home office for my job. So if I am around home, especially if I do end up running a grain cart, it usually is in corn harvest because my son is in school. So usually if we need extra people or extra hands and we have more trucks that are rolling at that point in time, then usually I'm in the grain cart for a couple of days. I'll take days off work.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do for work?
So yeah, I'm a field agronomist for Pioneer Seed Company. I really like my job. I've been with Pioneer for about 5.5 years. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, actually. I've worked retail. I did crop consulting for about 7.5 years independently. I've worked for Bayer Crop Science. I've worked for BASF, and now I'm with Pioneer. So kind of seen all aspects and different points of how the business works on the retail side. So from retail to the major corporations that produce everything that we end up putting in the ground and using on our crops. It's kind of an interesting dynamic where I can see both sides. I can see the grower side. I'm on the grower side, but I'm also on the other side, the corporate side.
That's so interesting. So with the canola seed, do you have to buy that like corn and beans every year, or are you able to? Okay.
They're hybrids. So you have to buy them every year. You'll buy a hybrid from a company and you'll plant it in the ground. And and there's Clearfield canola, there's Liberty Link canola, there's Roundup Ready or Optimum Glide canola. And then they are there's two companies actually, I think, that have stacks. So they have a Roundup Ready Liberty Link stack product too that's on the market.
Since you guys started raising canola, what's the biggest change that you have seen?
The straight cutting is probably the biggest thing. When I first started, so I graduated from college a long time ago, back in 2004. Back then, everything was swathed. All the canola was swathed. Interstate seed was big back then. There is no interstate seed anymore. They were bought by Monsanto. But the differences with the companies, that you're buying from has changed. The being able to straight cut canola has really changed that marketplace. The acres were very limited before you could straight cut, just because guys had to have special equipment to really get into it. And now you see a lot of canola grown in, I would call them fringe areas. So areas that are not traditionally known for growing canola, Holly, Minnesota, Barnes County in North Dakota. There's a lot more acres that are going into canola than were before. And I think huge part of that has to do with the fact that we're able to straight cut canola. Whereas back before you didn't. Hybrids have really changed. Yield goals have increased. I think the biggest negative that we've really seen is more diseases. Diseases have really started to become a big problem. There's a new one that's relatively new, I guess. It was identified in 2014, but over the last 4 years, I've run into it quite frequently in the traditional area, and that's verticillium. Right now, there is really no way to control it. We're looking at genetics to try to find ways to be able to control it, but there's no fungicides on the marketplace or anything that do any type of control of that disease. So I think some of our traditional areas are going to start widening out rotations and moving away from canola a little bit, so that it'll be interesting to see what happens with that marketplace over the next how many years.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys strictly use canola oil in your house for cooking and baking?
For the most part, yes. I have canola oil. I do have a little bit of olive oil for just frying some stuff on the stovetop. I do like the olive oil a little bit, but yeah, that baking and everything else, all I buy is canola oil. I don't buy vegetable oil, sorry. And I probably should, because my husband would say, well, we grow corn. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Christy, for joining us today. And I hope things dry out for you this next week. And blessings on your harvest season. Stay safe out there. And thanks again.
Thank
Yep,
you.
and I'll send videos, guys. I'll send you some
Awesome.
pictures of us harvesting and some videos. So
That sounds great. Yeah. We'd love to capture that on here. So that'd be perfect. So, all right.
sounds good.
Just so you know, we're releasing this on the 25th.
Okay.
Of September. So it'll be a couple weeks, but that'll be perfect to throw those videos on whenever you guys get in the field. And then, yeah, it'll be the first in our series of harvest podcasts. So really excited and really thankful that you were able to make this work. So
yeah, hopefully we'll be, we didn't get as much as a lot of people. I think we only had 3/4 of an inch here. So
okay, that's perfect.
I think he was hoping maybe to try it Sunday afternoon or something to see if it's close to fit. Otherwise it'll probably be Monday or something. We'll see.
Okay, that sounds great. All
Thank
right.
you.